Now, this is going to be the first video in what I hope will be a long-running and fun series where we'll score Star Wars characters and eventually compile a nice long list of some of the best and worst in the franchise, not to mention, along the way, be able to look at and discuss why some are fan favorites and why some are not. There's even a chance that maybe years down the road, if this goes that long, that we could even revisit characters and see how and why they have risen or fallen in the hearts and minds of people as they get explored or used more in Disney Star Wars, but maybe I shouldn't get too far ahead of myself. Anyway, for those of you who have seen my Let's Talk Some Star Wars videos, which will continue alongside this series, it's going to be pretty much an identical format, where it starts with a poll, where you all get a chance to vote and comment. Then I'll make a follow-up video where I'll briefly go over the results and show how the character ranked or compared against, well, everyone else we've done before, and then I'll read through and respond to some comments. And if you're wondering, a link to my YouTube community page, which is where all the polls will show up if they don't pop up in your feed, will be in the description below. All that said, let's get to the results of our first character poll, where we'll see that 67% of people gave Ahsoka Tano an A, 26% gave her a B, 5% a C, which then left 1% to give her a D, and 2% to give her an F. And when we do the math and assign a value of 5 points to A and 1 to F, with everything else in between, we end up with an average score of 4.55, or a very solid A. And if you're curious or noticed, since this actually added up to 101% because of the way the numbers got rounded off, for the final calculations, I just took a percentage point away from the median score. Okay, and since this is the first character we've done, we obviously can't do a comparison or see how she ranks or stacks up to other characters we've previously done. So instead, I'll take a moment to say that to determine which character we do next, and I'll be doing this each and every week, I'm simply going to make and pin a comment below asking which character you think we should do. You can then respond to that comment, don't make a separate new one please, with one suggested character, and whichever one ends up with the most thumbs up after 24 hours or so will be the one we do next week. Though do be mindful not to suggest the same character someone else already has, because assuming there's going to end up being a ton of suggestions, I'm not going to go through and add up votes when a character gets suggested multiple times. I'm just going to look for the one that gets the most thumbs up on a single post. In fact, I may go through and try and delete comments that make the same suggestion twice if I notice them, and I'll ask my channel mods to watch for that too. I also do reserve the right to veto a winner should something clearly meant to be a joke win, though I hope to never have to do that. Okay, so all that said, and with the groundwork for this laid out, let's finally get to some comments. And we'll of course start with the top rated comment, which came to us from Dapper Cat, who said, "How many other characters introduced outside of the movies became as popular as Ahsoka has? The only one off the top of my head is Darth Revan, and now maybe Din Djarin with how well received The Mandalorian was. On her own, Ahsoka not only became a fan favorite character, but started off as someone most people didn't like. To go from hated to one of the most beloved characters in Star Wars is a remarkable feat." Then there's this comment from James Passot, who said, "It's interesting. Ahsoka was hated initially. Kinda see why. Her inclusion as Anakin's Padawan makes little sense initially, and she's seemingly just there to appeal to a demographic. Plus, she was annoying in the movie and to a lesser degree early on in the series. But she grew on everyone, and overcoming a bad first impression is impressive, almost more so than love at first sight." And you're right, that might just be the most impressive or fascinating thing about Ahsoka. For a lot of fans, it certainly wasn't love at first sight. If anything, it was the exact opposite. There were plenty of fans that initially just hated her, or just didn't like the idea of Anakin having a Padawan during the Clone Wars. In fact, there are still those who don't like that idea. And as far as I could tell, a lot of the people who gave her a low grade, not all, but a lot of them, did so because they just don't like the concept of Anakin having a Padawan, which is fine if you don't. Though I can only imagine if the Clone Wars movie and eventual series was coming out today, what some would be saying about the backlash Ahsoka was getting. Because I can tell you, as someone who 13 or so years ago now was keeping up with all the news about the upcoming movie and show, and then kept up with news as it went along, there was indeed a lot of hate for Ahsoka. But no one anywhere, not some in the fan base or those in the media, not that they took much interest in the show to be honest with you, was suggesting it was because she was a female character. In fact, most critics panned the Clone Wars movie and the character of Ahsoka. And as many of you pointed out in the comments, the results of this poll tend to destroy the asinine notion that Star Wars fans are against female characters. Because, though, no, we haven't done any other characters just yet, no matter how many we end up doing, I can guarantee you she's always going to be near the top. Okay, let's move on to some more comments, starting with this one from Jolson82, who said, I voted A because I think she has gotten a good character progression. She went from annoying brat to stalwart fighter to disillusioned soldier with difficulties in between, making her feel like a person, not a toon, all throughout in a sensical, plausible, and meaningful way. We also had this comment from Giovanna J, who said 2 words, character development. Hers is natural and true to her. You see her grow, evolve, and change. It's beautiful storytelling. Then there's this comment from Leaf Green Sniper, who said, I'd say an A for Ahsoka. She was brash and bratty in the movie, and she failed with the Bomber Squadron in Season 1. Then she turned into a mature young lady as Clone Wars passed on, eventually making the very adult decision to leave the Jedi Order. I think her failures gave a base to improve upon, compared to Disney's female Star Wars characters in Rey, as she was already perfect. And those D's and F's have to be trolls. Not sure how you can think Ahsoka is that bad, but I could be missing something. Next then, we have this comment from Luno, who said, her character arc was done incredibly well. Seeing the war through her eyes as she matures and realizes how the Order is falling is the best part of the Clone Wars. Also, the Anakin relationship adds so much to his arc. That then brings us to this comment from Sophia Para, who said, she is my absolute favorite character in all of Star Wars. As the young female that I was back in 2008, having a young female Jedi that I could identify with was really special. I didn't even know that people didn't like her, that they thought her annoying. For me, she was always cool, and witnessing her development and her growth really is delightful, and knowing that people that loathed her grew to like her and her journey and appreciate her role in Star Wars is really satisfying. I've always been a Star Wars fan. I grew up with Star Wars, and Ahsoka accompanied me during my teen years and grew up alongside me. And finally, in this little block of comments, we have this one from Rasan Shan, who said, it's not original, but I gave her an A by virtue of her journey as a character. She started off brash and as a nuisance, not too likable, but the eventual growth she undergoes throughout the Clone Wars until her appearance in Rebels was like seeing a different person. Her struggles and subsequent maturity through those hardships molded her into the most well-written character in the entire series. I mean, in many ways, a character is the journey we witness them experience, whether it's a hero, villain, or anything in between. Oftentimes what makes or breaks a person's interest in a character is how much we understand and or relate to them, and how much we want to either root for them or maybe against them. And when it comes to a hero, the more you see them struggle, the more you see them have to learn and grow as a person before they ultimately achieve some type of victory or even a crippling defeat, the more you can see yourself in them and be inspired by them to overcome your own problems. And one of the things I love about Ahsoka is she does start off as this bratty kid who thinks she knows everything and can do anything, and she's part of the Jedi Order and seems or believes to have everything already figured out. But as she goes on, she continues to get humbled and begins to question things until the Order she once had an unwavering faith in turns on her, forcing her to make the hard decision to walk away in order to figure out who she is and what she actually wants. And so everything she once was and believed in at the beginning of her story has changed by the end of it, and she becomes a better and stronger person or character because of that. Her story in the Clone Wars sums up the transition from child to adulthood nearly perfectly, which is something you can either appreciate as someone who literally grows up with a character as the show went on, or as someone who looks back at their own youth, no matter how long ago that might have been, and you can very much relate to it. Okay, next up here we have this comment from Thomas G, who said, I give her somewhere between a C+ and B-. While she is a well-developed character, with a lot of personality and some good character development, I think it was a mistake to make her Anakin's Padawan, since the relationship doesn't affect Anakin during the events of Revenge of the Sith. As for all we know, he never had a Padawan in the first place. Secondly, her surviving as long as she has, and not rebuilding the Jedi Order, nor interacting with Luke in any meaningful way, adds to the idea that she has been shoehorned into this universe almost as if she's Dave Filoni's self-inserted fan character. If they handled her role in the universe better and ended her character arc in a more satisfying way, I would have given her a solid B. Okay, you certainly make some fair arguments here, and many people do bring up the fact that Ahsoka not being in or mentioned at all in Revenge of the Sith, which is obviously because the character was created after the movie came out, is a bit odd. But personally, I don't really have a problem with it. Yes, according to the Clone Wars series, Ahsoka was or is a big part of Anakin's life and likely would have been on his mind during the events of that movie, especially since, minor spoiler alert here, though the trailers have already shown it, he'll actually be seeing her again shortly before that movie takes place in the Clone Wars, or even during the movie perhaps. But just because he doesn't mention her, or she isn't seen in Episode 3, doesn't mean she couldn't or doesn't exist. I mean, and maybe this isn't the best example, but it should give you something to think about. But I look at a character like Mon Mothma in the original trilogy. She doesn't appear or get mentioned in either of the first two films, yet she was the leader of the rebellion the whole time, and seems to just appear in Return of the Jedi. And so just because you don't see an important character at certain points, even if they're personally very important to someone front and center in the story, like Ahsoka was to Anakin, it doesn't mean they're not there, that they just don't get mentioned. As for the other 2 points you make, I could certainly agree that in all reality, Ahsoka should have probably been killed by Vader in the Rebels episode, Twilight of the Apprentice. Oddly enough, Dave Filoni later using time travel to bring her back sounds like someone very much unable to let go. And don't get me wrong, I'm excited to see the adventures of Ahsoka the White eventually, but it may very well have been a better way to end her story to be killed by Vader. It also would have solved the problem of why she never helped Luke. Okay, so once again I've probably rambled more than actually read comments, so let me fire off a quick more before wrapping up this video, starting with this one from Cedric Jean-Felix, who said, "A perfect example of a character that grows up with its audience, telling us that the world isn't always right or wrong, black or white, light or dark. The 'I'm no Jedi' line when fighting Vader takes on a new meaning that hasn't really been explored that much in canon, that just because you're Force sensitive, you don't have to be either a Jedi or Sith, you can follow the Force." Next up then we have this comment from Nick Cook, who said, "I originally had B, but with the character arc she had and how much I really didn't like her in the beginning of the Clone Wars, there's no way I couldn't put her up there with the likes of Luke. Top grade character who actually grows like a real person. That's the fleshed out type of thing we're so severely lacking from Disney Star Wars right now, the Mando being possibly the only exception." Next then we have this comment from Sridat Prasad, my apologies if I just butchered your name. They said, "My favorite Star Wars scene, Rebels, when she realizes who Vader is." Then we have Anakin Skywalker himself weighing in on his Padawan with this to say, "I choose A because she is my Padawan. I'm obviously the best master out there. I still wonder why the Jedi Council won't grant me the rank of master. It's outrageous. It's unfair." And finally here we have this comment from Brandon Manuel, who said, "She is the Luke Skywalker of my generation. I have spoken." And I very much agree with that. I think Ahsoka Tano is the Luke of those who grew up with the Clone Wars, as maybe Obi-Wan is the Luke of the generation that grew up with the prequels, and as Rey is or was supposed to be the Luke of those who are growing up with the sequels, I guess. Only time will tell what kids today think and have to say about Rey 10 or so years from now. Anyway, I don't think the results of this poll surprised anyone. Ahsoka is easily one of the best characters in Star Wars, made all the more amazing by the fact that not only did she start at a disadvantage, considering just how many didn't like her at the start, but she also, as of yet, has not been in any of the big release movies, or should I say live-action films, other than The Rise of Skywalker, where we just get to hear her voice. Yes, she was in the Clone Wars movie, but that didn't do quite so well at the box office. Not to mention, any very casual fan or average moviegoer who saw her in that likely found her forgettable at best. And so it'll be very interesting going forward to see how she ultimately stacks up against some of the other characters across Star Wars. Well, that's all I've got for you this time. I hope you enjoyed the video and this slightly new series that we'll be doing. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell us what you think about Ahsoka, or to suggest the next character we should do. And they can be from any aspect of Star Wars, anything from the old EU to the new Disney canon and everything in between. You can even pick Lumpy from the holiday special. No, I'm kidding. Don't vote for Lumpy. I will veto that one. Anyway, leave a comment below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.